Grab your map, courage and some gold to spend on new abilities. It's the best Metroidvania games you can play on PC right now. Before we dive into 10 side-scrolling worlds of platforming delights, it's important to note what a Metroidvania game actually is. Ironically, the name comes from two game series that we're not actually putting on this list because they're not out on PC, Metroid and Castlevania. Taking inspiration from both series, a Metroidvania game includes a sprawling world map you can explore freely, but with initially locked elements that require improved abilities or even weaponry. While unlike a traditional platformer, you can go wherever you want, you'll follow a story that means you'll eventually level up enough to unlock it all and head back to those once forbidden areas. Now that's out of the way, from owl adventures to pinball wizardry, here are the 10 best Metroidvania games that you can play right now on PC. These days, we're used to games looking snazzy, but Axiom Verge, a gorgeous pixelated action-adventure from Thomas Happ, is the sort of pretty that grabs hold of your nostalgia glands and refuses to let go. It's set in a huge interconnected cave network, with each zone featuring its own music, theming and enemies. Puzzles and gates block your path, the clue is in the title of this video, but there are no checkpoints or waypoints to set you in the right direction. This means the laser-focused power-ups feel meaningful and varied, but you'll need to think hard about how each one works to progress. And, like all the best Metroidvania games, it's influenced by those inspirational 8 and 16-bit games without ever being a slave to them. It improves and refines all the things that make the genre so compelling, and packages them into something that feels devilishly satisfying whether or not you ever owned a Super Nintendo. Salt and Sanctuary could nestle comfortably on a number of other best-of videos, most notably that apparently never-ending list of games that are a bit like Dark Souls. And that's not a bad thing. As well as the obvious Symphony of the Night influence, the two-person husband and wife dev team at Ska Studios look to From Software for inspiration. You have salt instead of souls and sanctuaries instead of bonfires, and that same satisfying cycle of failure, repetition and reward is a huge part of your progression. And, best of all, dare we say it, there are elements to Salt and Sanctuary that might actually be better than Dark Souls. Because it's in 2D, you'll never be able to blame your deaths on a wonky camera disappearing up the Asylum Demon's backside, which might actually be a bad thing, depending on how eager you are to blame your inevitable failures on someone else. If you've long outgrown your Burton phase of wearing Jack Skellington stripy trousers and more eyeliner than thought to be physically possible, chances are you still like things to be, well, a bit more monochrome. Well, Hollow Knight ticks that black and white box nicely with its gothic aesthetic and bleak yet adorable visuals. Okay, it doesn't stay black and white the whole time, but by that point the adventures of your tiny bug knight without a name will have got so thrilling that even those allergic to colour will stay. It's not easy as you take on the world with only a nail and then gradually growing abilities and spells, but Hollow Knight is a stylish and deeply satisfying Metroidvania. Hallow's Nest is packed full of hellish bosses and perfect platforming. In fact, it's one of the only entries on here that we've also got on our best platformer lists, because it's just that good. Mechanics are never really the heroes in games. They're the ones who fix things, sort your vehicle out before sending you out into the wasteland. Thankfully, Iconoclasts fixes all that, making mechanic Robin the star of the show in a gorgeous pixelated side-scroller. Believe us when we say this is no wrench. Okay, fine, that was terrible, but thankfully Iconoclasts isn't. Whether you're using your golden wrench to open doors and solve time puzzles, or battering enemies around the head with it, this is a brilliant Metroidvania with a nefariously dark plot. Puzzling can get tricky but never frustratingly so, and the occasional boss fight is a satisfying use of your blaster when a wrench just won't do the trick. A labour of love by developer Joachim Sandberg, who worked on the project for more than 8 years, Iconoclasts was thankfully very much worth the wait. It's not easy being a tequila farmer. One minute you're alive, farming agave, the next your love interest is kidnapped, you're banished to the land of the dead, and then resurrected as a super-powered luchador. Phew. Well, it's safe to say that Guacamelee has a strong start as you launch sideways into a world of brawling, skeletons and ridiculously bright colours. Thankfully, this isn't even the best part. That's saved for the perfect platforming, chat with goats, and, oh yeah, ludicrously satisfying combat that lets you juggle enemies in the air like some kind of bodybuilding circus performer. If you've already sampled the delights of Guacamelee, the Super Turbo Championship Edition is still a reason to return. There are 2 bonus levels to leap and smash your way through, and you can even do it with friends. Brash, beautiful and brilliant, Guacamelee is a sheer joy of a Metroidvania. Yes, Cave Story looks old. So old, in fact, that you'd easily mistake it for a game released in 1994 rather than 2004, which also, yes, is still really old. But there's a reason it's one of the most beloved indie games of all time, and why it's still worth seeking out the updated version available on Steam. First off, it's the sort of simple, compelling story that reminds you why you fell in love with games. An amnesiac hero, a mysterious race of rabbit-like creatures, and a typically maniacal scientist. And structurally, it's very similar to the titles that influenced it, specifically Metroid. It all wraps up into an adventure with a warm, engaging story, pleasing run-and-gun combat, and the sort of compelling loop of exploration, expansion and discovery that will keep you coming back for weeks. And the fact that this was made by one person should be an inspiration to us all. Put simply, it's unforgettable. Just because a mashup hasn't been done before doesn't mean it won't work. While Peanut Butter and Onions probably isn't a good example, it turns out that Metroidvania and Pinball really is. Yoku's Island Express pops you into the shoes of a dung beetle postman who's new to the island of Makuma. Helpfully, he arrives in this beautiful side-scrolling world attached to a giant ball that's just perfect for the flippers scattered everywhere. While performing tasks for various island inhabitants, collecting fruit is the order of the day here as you happily bounce from place to place. On top of being utterly charming, look, Yoku has a party horn called the Noisemaker to wake up characters. The platforming here has to be perfectly timed, but it's never at the expense of fun. The intuitive controls are always gloriously satisfying too, as you send Yoku flying through the air. Just like traditional Metroidvania, you constantly unlock new moves, like the hilarious Slug Hoover, and there's plenty of world to explore as you unlock new bumpers by spending fruit. In short, it's flipping good fun. If you didn't think it could get any better than the original steampunk western adventure, then it'll be refreshing to know that this is definitely a Toy Story situation, not Cars. Sorry, mater. Steamworld Dig 2 once again feeds that delicious mining resource loop, but this time the removal of procedural generation means that everything feels a little richer this time around. Heading below ground with new hero Dorothy in search of old hero Rusty is still a quest for loot, but the story, platforming and puzzling on offer here is bigger and better. Hordes of enemies and hidden caves of precious treasures await in the beautiful underground caverns, and while of course you don't start off with much, it's not long before you've got a pneumatic arm and a selection of bombs to smash through previously locked entrances. Plus, if the weapons aren't good enough for you, if you hunt down enough upgrade cogs, you can even get a selection of perks. In short, you could say that Steamworld Dig 2 just rocks. Some games are worth their time spent in development hell. Team Fortress took 9 years, Prey 11, Spore 8. Okay, the less we talk about that last one the better, but at least Owlboy, with 9 years under its belt, was very much worth the wait. This is a retro-inspired, beautiful side-scroller with true heart. And while you might think that Flight would leave platforming somewhat redundant, it just doesn't. Playing as Otis, a young mute owl who struggles to fit in, you must make friends, and in order to take on sky pirates, carry these companions with you to make the most of their individual abilities. As an owl, you understandably can't do much against gunfire, but your mates can, and it's a constant joy to pick up new pals to reach new areas. And, oh yes, prepare to get repeatedly kicked in the feels. Yep, while Owlboy offers up a gorgeous Metroidvania, there's a story here that will happily pluck away at those heartstrings while you solve puzzles and take on bosses in new, inventive ways. In a list full of absurdly lovely games, the hand-painted world of Dust and Elysian Tale still stands out as especially gorgeous. But it's more than just a pretty face, it's brilliantly written and utterly captivating. On the face of it, it's ticking all the standard fantasy bobbins boxes: a magical weapon called the Blade of Anra, a mysterious warrior, and a furry, light relief character called Fidget. But Dust is a surprisingly deep game with a smart, intuitive combat system that's simple to pick up but complex to master. And the expansive open world and rewarding non-linear platforming provides us with the very definition of the modern Metroidvania game: brisk, charming and simple to understand, with a meaty backstory that provides depth and motivation for everything you do. Ignore anyone who tells you that they don't make them like this anymore. Dust is proof that they most certainly do. Congratulations, you've picked up enough magical doodads to reach the end of this video. Drop us a like so we can share in your success, hit the on-screen link to continue your adventure with our other top 10s, and subscribe to Logitech G for more shows just like this one.